Whose inheritance is being ripped apart in a San Diego coffee shop? I'm Amos Carter, 36, CEO of a small real estate firm in San Diego, and I was halfway through a hazelnut latte when my phone buzzed with the news. My father was gone, and Dana, my stepmother, had locked me out of his will. I felt my heart drop, the bitter steam of coffee stinging my nostrils as rain tapped against the cafe window. But I knew this was no accident. My mother, Lorraine, died when I was 10, and Dana moved in with her 2 children, Mia and Jared, turning our home into a gallery of her polished smiles and silenced mine. Now the ticking clock was set to tomorrow's will reading in San Francisco, and the stakes were triple. I risked losing everything my mother and father built. I faced the public humiliation of being the estranged son. And worst of all, I suspected Dana's sharp mind had already rewritten history. I had 2 hours to decide: arrive early and fight with words, or bail and live with regret. I chose to arrive early. I drove north, windows down, tasting the damp air of the coastal highway, the scent of brine and wet pines sharpening my resolve. In the law office lobby, marble floors echoed high heels and whispered gossip as Dana swept past me in a tailored coat, her perfume masking her true nature. Judges, lawyers, secretaries, all eyes flicked between us in curiosity loops. Who was this quiet stranger? Did he know something they didn't? As they led us into a wood-paneled room, sunlight slanted through blind slats, painting lines across Dana's smug face. The lawyer cleared his throat and read the original will, leaving me with fond memories. Gasps filled the room. Third stakes hit. Dana would gain full control of Carter Developments, my inheritance, and even the family home. It felt like a punch to the chest. My mother's diary, the one I kept hidden, burned in my jacket pocket. I let the lawyer finish, then paused for a breath. Time for a breather beat, eyes flicking to Dana's tightening jaw. I believe there's a later version, I said softly, sliding an envelope across the table. Silence slammed into the room like a storm. The lawyer opened it, brows lifting. Hands shook as he read the second will, notarized just 2 weeks after Dad's heart attack, restoring everything to me and detailing accusations against Dana for embezzlement. Dana's face went ashen. Jared and Mia paled behind her. Click. Pattern interrupt. I watched her unravel, every polished move exposed. If you were in my shoes, would you stand silent or strike back? Whose voice is that accusing Dana of betraying her own husband? 2 days after the will reading, I stood in the silver-glassed boardroom of Carter Developments in San Francisco, the smell of polished wood and stale coffee stinging my senses. The rain drummed on the windows as Dana sat at the head of the long table, flanked by Jared and Mia, their smug faces half lit by the gray dawn. I felt my heart pound. This meeting would decide everything: my reputation, the company's future, and whether justice would triumph or falter. The stakes were stacked. If I failed, Dana would bury my father's name and mine. She'd keep every penny she'd siphoned off, and she'd silence me forever. If I succeeded, I'd expose her lies, regain my family legacy, and protect Carter Developments. And worst of all, if I didn't act soon, she might undo the new will in court and lock me out just as she had before. I opened my laptop and projected a spreadsheet onto the frosted glass wall. A clear timeline of every secret transfer of funds from our company accounts into shell corporations she controlled. The room fell silent, eyes darting between the numbers, and my calm face. Breather beat. I inhaled the sharp scent of ink on my papers and let the silence stretch for a moment. Then I spoke in a measured tone. I'm invoking Article 23 of our bylaws. We will conduct an immediate forensic audit of all financial transactions from the past 5 years. Murmurs rose. Jared sneered, but his voice shook when he asked, "Do you even have proof?" Pattern interrupt hook. I clicked a file open on the screen, an audio clip from 2 months before Dad's death. In it, Dana's voice dripped with malice as she told Jared, "We'll lock him out after he signs. He won't last long." You could hear their laughter echoing off the walls. Dana's eyes went wide. Mia's face turned as pale as her blouse. Curiosity loop. Who recorded this? Thomas, my father's assistant. He sensed something was wrong and secretly wired the study. The board members leaned forward. I pressed play on another clip. This one a phone call between Dana and Raymond Holt, where she promised to sell company land at half price in exchange for a kickback. Their voices felt like icy blades in the room. Moral outrage and justice. "This is fraud, plain and simple," I said, voice steady. If you compromised our company's integrity, you broke the law and the trust of every employee and client. The CFO, an older man who'd been with Dad since the start, stood up, anger in his eyes. I trusted you, Dana. His words hung heavy in the damp air. Location refresh. Behind us, the city skyline glowed faintly through the rain, San Francisco's towers reflecting our fall from grace. I watched Dana fidget with her pen, her polished nails tapping the mahogany table faster than her heart could beat. Timed comment prompt. If you were in my shoes, would you have given up or pressed on? The room shifted as though waiting for an answer. I gave them none. Instead, I laid out the third bombshell. Documents proving that 2 months ago, she transferred 40% of Carter Development's landmark property in Oakland into a trust she secretly controlled. The gasps rolled through the room like thunder. Dana's fake bravado crumbled. She bit her lip, her voice cracking. You can't prove that. I slid a folder across to her, sealed deeds, bank statements, and timestamps. Mia wept quietly. Jared's face was a storm of guilt and fear. Breather beat. I paused, letting the weight of the evidence sink in, feeling my own pulse slow as clarity settled. Next step, I continued softly, is to notify the authorities and our shareholders. They deserve to know the truth. Silence pressed in. Then Dana rose, her voice trembling but defiant. You think you've won? I met her gaze, calm but unyielding. This isn't about winning. It's about restoring what's right. Soft shadow ending. As Dana and her children left the room, escorted by stunned board members, I looked out at the rain-slick city. The fight wasn't over. Legal battles lay ahead. Reputations hung in the balance, and a final verdict would come only after months of trials. But for the first time, I felt the legacy of my father shining through the storm. I gathered my papers, heart steady, and walked out of that boardroom ready for whatever came next. Because justice, when planned and served cold, cannot be denied. Whose voice is booming through the courthouse lobby at dawn? I arrived at the federal building in Oakland before sunrise. The air heavy with diesel and the flash of security lights painting everything in harsh white. My heart pounded a triple-stack drumbeat. First, the risk that Dana might bribe her way out. Second, the fear that the judge could dismiss evidence on a technicality. And third, the knowledge that if I lost here, Dana would rebuild her lies, reclaim Carter Developments, and bury my father's true legacy forever. I clutched my briefcase, feeling the worn leather press against my suit, breathing in the concrete scent mixed with damp fog off the bay. Pattern interrupt hook. Moments after I signed in, the prosecutor's aide handed me a thick file labeled Exhibit A, Financial Forensics. Then paused, eyes wide. You need to see page 237. I opened it to find a scanned letter from my father to his banker, dated just weeks before he died, naming me sole beneficiary of every Carter asset if any heir was indicted for fraud, a secret clause in the Lorraine Foundation Trust. Silence slammed into me like a door. Curiosity loop. Who had known about that clause? I'd only discovered it last night in a dusty safe deposit box at First National Bank, guided there by Dad's old banker, Miss Nguyen, who whispered, "He wanted you protected, son." Location refresh. Now, standing in that cold marble hallway, I realized I held more than dirt on Dana. I held Dad's final defense. I stepped into courtroom 4B as Dana's attorney paced behind her, her expensive heels echoing. Sensory anchor. The gavel smelled of polished wood and ink as the bailiff called the court to order. I could taste the metal of fear on my tongue, but pressed forward, heart steady. I presented Exhibit A to the judge, voice measured. Your Honor, this clause invalidates any prior will and punishes fraud by disinheritance. It's unambiguous. The judge flipped through pages, brow furrowing. Breather beat. I swallowed, feeling my throat cool as the judge studied my father's precise language. Moral outrage and justice. Dana Carter redirected millions from Carter Developments into shell accounts, I continued, betraying shareholders, employees, and every family that trusted this company. I laid out the forensic audit, live charts of misappropriated funds, and a timeline showing how she manipulated my father's illness to sign over powers of attorney. The prosecutor nodded, severity in his eyes. Timed comment prompt. If you heard your stepmother was stealing your inheritance, would you demand evidence like this? The judge tapped his pen. Curiosity loop. Then he paused at another document, a handwritten post-it from my father's hospital room. Dana is poisoning me. Amos must have trust. The judge's eyes flicked to me, then to Dana, who paled so much I thought she might faint. Pattern interrupt twist. At that moment, the doors burst open and Ms. Nguyen entered with a binder of wiretap transcripts. Dana's own phone calls, where she admitted, "Once he's gone, the company and the house are ours." Gasps rolled through the gallery. Dana's attorney stammered. Dana's face contorted with shock and rage. I leaned forward and whispered to the judge, "The final piece, Your Honor." I handed over a memory stick containing security camera footage of Dana and Jared removing original stock certificates from Dad's safe, proof of embezzlement and forgery. The judge looked at the footage on the big screen. Dana's silhouette and Jared's familiar gait, luring the certificates out of the locked vault late at night. A hush fell. Moral outrage and justice. "This is criminal conduct," the judge declared. "Dana Carter, you are charged with embezzlement, fraud, and witness tampering." Dana trembled, her calm veneer shattered. Jared shrank in his seat. Location refresh. The courtroom lights seemed brighter now, as though spotlighting their downfall. My chest felt tight, relief mingled with the weight of what had unfolded. Breather beat. I exhaled slowly, the click of cameras and murmurs of reporters rushing in like wind through a canyon. Curiosity loop. As the bailiff led Dana away in cuffs, I realized one more secret remained. A sealed affidavit Dad had written but never filed, naming Raymond Holt as her accomplice. I handed that to the prosecutor, who promised to open a new case. Soft shadow ending. Leaving the courthouse, the fog had lifted to reveal a golden sunrise over Oakland's skyline. I steered my car toward the ferry, the water rippling beneath me, thinking of my mother's paper cranes tucked in my coat pocket. Justice had been served cold, and Carter Developments was safe, for now. But one thread remained unresolved. One question still hanging in the air. Who else was involved, and what more would I discover on this path of hidden revenge? Whose email just confirmed that Dana's fallout was only the beginning? Early that Monday, I stood in the deserted lobby of Carter Development's Oakland headquarters, the echo of my footsteps mingling with the distant hum of the city's morning traffic. My heart thrummed like a drum. First, the fear that Dana might default on her court bond and vanish with ill-gotten gains. Second, the worry that our new board, still split between old loyalists and broken trusts, could vote to stall my audit. And third, the knowledge that if I didn't move fast, Jared might try to wrest a power of attorney back from me or bribe the remaining accountants to bury their head in the sand. The rain had cleared, but the damp concrete still smelled of fog and exhaust, reminding me how fragile the ground was beneath our feet. I felt the smooth leather of my jacket as I pressed into the elevator, wondering if my father had ever sensed this kind of tension when he built his company. Pattern interrupt hook. 4 floors up, I swiped my badge and entered the boardroom, only to find it empty except for the soft glow of the digital clock on the wall and a single envelope waiting at the head of the table. Sensory anchor. I tore it open, and the scent of jasmine tea dried on paper hit me, mixed with a faint trace of expensive cologne. Inside was a printout of an anonymous tip. Dana has a hidden offshore account in the Isle of Man. Check the Mercer files. I froze. No one on our legal team knew about Mercer, my father's secret back channel for community grants, until now. Curiosity loop. Who sent this? A former employee? A rival? Or someone close to Dana with a guilty conscience? I slipped the printout into my pocket, my mind racing. I had to act without alerting Dana or Jared. Location refresh. I headed down to the Mercer archives in the sealed records room beneath the building. A forgotten vault lined with dusty binders and boxes, each labeled in Dad's neat handwriting. The air was heavy with the musk of old paper and latent hope. I pulled down the Mercer ledger for 2019, just before Dad's will update, and my pulse quickened when I saw entries referencing Project Avalon, deposit codes, and cryptic remarks, awaiting offshore settlement. Breather beat. I ran my thumb over the embossed cover of my father's foundation ledger, comforting myself with the pattern of creases where years of use had softened the leather. Then, as quietly as possible, I opened the Mercer ledger to cross-reference names. Moral outrage and justice. There it was. Dana's name encoded under MD, alongside a shell corporation, Euler Management Limited. The next column showed a transfer, $2.5 million, the exact sum missing from Carter Development's last quarter. My blood boiled at the betrayal. She'd stolen not only Dad's legacy but the company's life, and she'd nearly gotten away with it. Timed? Comment prompt. If you discovered your stepmother siphoned millions into an offshore haven, what would you do? Pause a moment and think. The vault's heavy door creaked as I closed the ledger, but I wasn't alone. Jared's silhouette appeared behind me, his usual bravado gone. Thought you'd like to know, I said, voice low but steady, sliding the ledger across the table. His eyes widened, guilt and fear warring in their depths. Curiosity loop. He asked, "What are you going to do with that?" But the elevator bell rang. The only warning was a low buzz. I glanced at the clock. Less than 10 minutes before the board reconvened. Pattern interrupt twist. Rather than confront Jared here, I slipped the ledger into my jacket and locked the vault door, then strode back upstairs to the boardroom just as everyone filtered in. The rain had given way to a pale sun, slanted light cutting across the conference table. I didn't let anyone speak first. "Before we discuss the audit," I said, placing the ledger in front of the chair where Dana used to sit, "I have one more item." Heads turned, breath caught. I clicked open my laptop and projected the Mercer page onto the wall. Isla Management Limited, $2.5 million to Dana Carter, dated 2 weeks after my father's passing. Silence crashed in. Dana's empty seat felt colder than the vault beneath. I let it hang, then added softly, "These funds were drawn from Carter Development's payroll accounts. They belong to our employees, our community, not your offshore escape." Sensory anchor. The hum of the projector mixed with the distant ring of cell phones, creating a tense soundtrack. Breather beat. I took a breath, tasting the faint sweetness of jasmine still lingering from the envelope, and watched the board's reaction. Some looked shocked, others relieved I'd surfaced justice. Moral outrage and justice. I propose we freeze all transactions with Isla Management Limited, file a civil suit for recovery, and notify federal authorities for criminal charges. I continued. Dana and Jared will answer for this. A veteran board member, her voice cracking with emotion, stood and said, "It's time to reclaim what's ours." Soft shadow ending. As the votes were cast in my favor, I remembered Dad's gentle laugh when he folded paper cranes with me. I pictured his steady hands guiding mine, the promise he made that truth would outlast deceit. The meeting adjourned with a decision to press charges and restore the stolen funds. Yet I couldn't shake one lingering question. Who else had fed Dana the lies that poisoned Dad's final years? I gathered my things, the Mercer ledger tucked safely in my coat, and stepped out into the bright California sun, knowing the fight was far from over. I'd uncovered one more layer of betrayal, but the deepest secrets remained buried, and I was determined to exhume them all. Whose message just landed in my inbox as I walked onto the ferry in San Francisco Bay? I was halfway across the water, the steel deck cold under my boots and the salty wind whipping at my collar, when my phone buzzed with an email from a private investigator I'd hired weeks ago to trace Dana's remaining assets. My heart thundered in 3 beats. First, the fear that Dana might still hold undisclosed shell companies. Second, the dread that she could flip witnesses or hide evidence abroad. And third, the knowledge that if I missed this final lead, her network of lies would slip through my fingers forever. I pressed my thumbprint to open the email. The subject line read, "Redwood account, immediate action required." Pattern interrupt hook. Inside was a scanned bank statement from a small credit union in Redwood City listing a recent deposit of $500,000 under Dana's maiden name. A deposit made just 2 days ago. Curiosity loop. Who had helped her launder that money? I glanced over my shoulder at the mist-shrouded skyline, the Golden Gate Bridge faintly outlined against the dawn, feeling the eerie calm of the early morning settle under my skin. Sensory anchor. My fingertips tingled against the cool glass railing as I folded the printout, the tang of salt in the air reminding me of how close I was to exposing the final strand of her web. Triple stake stack. If I didn't act fast, Dana would vanish with $500,000 more. If I dragged my feet, my company's reputation could tumble in public scandal. And if I failed, every act of justice I'd wrung from the courts would ring hollow, as she'd get away with this last betrayal. I jumped off the ferry and texted the PI. "Meet me at Redwood Credit Union in 10 minutes. Bring every account record you have." I raced down the Embarcadero, the boardwalk's wooden planks thrumming beneath my shoes, past joggers and early commuters who didn't know they were part of my story now. At Redwood Credit Union, the receptionist glanced up as I barged in with my suit still damp from the ferry spray. I flashed my credentials and the emailed statement. In the back office, I met the PI, a wiry woman named Carla, whose keen eyes had uncovered Dana's offshore accounts. She slid a folder across the desk with a soft thunk that echoed like a verdict. Inside were pages showing Dana had set up a straw account through her sister's maiden name and then wired $500,000 to a property escrow in Arizona, her planned escape route. Breather beat. I leaned back in the vinyl chair, the hum of the office printers and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights giving me a moment to steady my racing pulse. Moral outrage and justice. She siphoned more than $3 million in total, Carla said, voice low. This last $500,000 was meant for a townhouse near Scottsdale. My jaw clenched as I thought of the families who'd lost wages, the employees whose bonuses had disappeared, and the community projects left half-built. I pushed the folder back. Let's freeze it all, I said. Issue a hold on that account and trace the wire to Arizona. Carla nodded and set to work. Location refresh. As I stepped back onto the rainy sidewalk, I called our corporate counsel and the detective assigned to Dana's fraud case, coordinating simultaneous actions. Court orders to block the funds, subpoenas for the escrow company, and a plan to arrest Dana if she tried to cross state lines. Then I paused for a moment under the credit union's awning, the drizzle turning light, feeling the weight of my journey, from the son Dana pushed aside to the man who had dismantled her empire of deceit. Timed comment prompt. If you were following a stepmom who stole millions, would you go this far? Or stop at the courthouse? The rain slowed to a mist, and I let my mind run through the next steps. I would fly to Arizona myself if I had to, but first I needed to tie up California's loose ends. Curiosity loop. Who else had helped Dana hide these funds? I remembered a name I'd seen in a corporate email thread, LR Associates, a small law firm notorious for offshore money movements. I forwarded Carla's findings to my team and instructed them to subpoena LR Associates records. Then I booked a flight to Phoenix, determined to cut off Dana's final route. Soft shadow ending. Later that evening, I stood on the terrace of my San Diego office, the last light of sunset painting the sky pink and orange, a paper origami dove perched beside me, as a reminder of my mother's gentle hope. My phone buzzed again. The escrow company confirmed funds were frozen, and a bench warrant for Dana's arrest in Arizona was issued. Justice had been served. Every layer of her deception peeled back, every stolen dollar reclaimed, and Carter Developments saved. Yet in the quiet hum of the office, I realized something deeper remained. The knowledge that no amount of money or court ruling could restore my childhood or erase the years Dana stole from me. But I had reclaimed my father's name, honored my mother's memory, and built a legacy founded on truth. The city lights flickered on across the bay, and I whispered into the twilight, "You thought you could erase me, Dana, but I am still here, and I always will be."